Hi, my name is Anuj Desai. I'm the host of a weekly podcast called the Cannabis Conversation. I'm very pleased today to have been asked by the Centre for Medicinal Cannabis to chair a panel to discuss the launch of a new industry body called the Association for the Cannabinoid Industry. On my panel today, I've got Dr Parveen Bhatarah, who is the Regulatory and Compliance Lead for the ACI. I've got Dr Sarah Gaunt, who works for Global Regulatory Services and is acting as a novel foods consultant. And I've got Shomi Malik, who's the Development Director for ACI. Okay, Shomi, why don't we start with you? Firstly, would you give us a little bit of background about what you do and how you arrived at the ACI?
Sure. Before joining the CMC/ACI, I was a CBD supply chain consultant, working with a lot of different products from around the world. And through a lot of trial and error and making a lot of mistakes, found out the issues that the wider industry faces. I'm very passionate about bringing this amazing product to a lot of people in the right, safe way, and that journey has led me to the ACI.
Great. So why don't we talk a bit about that? The CMC was set up at the end of last year in 2018, and now you guys are setting up a separate body called the Association for Cannabinoid Industry, ACI. Tell us a bit about how you got there.
So the CMC, when it started out, was representing companies in the medicinal space. It very quickly became apparent that this wellness sector that sits outside of medicinal companies needed guiding through the regulatory challenges. When we got asked to take a look at this space, we decided to do a really deep dive into the market to really understand what it is we're addressing here. So we commissioned the most robust market sizing exercise for the sector. Alongside that, we did a YouGov poll to establish public attitudes, which corroborated the findings of the market sizing study. And lastly, we did a product testing exercise where we took 30 products off the high street and tested them to see what was the content of these products.
Cool, and we'll get into a bit more detail about what the ACI is doing, but can you give us some high-level results of that that piece of work that you did?
Yeah, so the findings of these three pieces of research showed us that we needed to put some trust back into the industry, and we're now building the team and the capabilities by investing in strategic partnerships and experts in their field to be able to implement the findings of our research. Mm-hmm. And this is what the ACI is all about.
Great. And what were some of the actual findings of the report?
The first thing was the size of the market. £300 million in sales just last year. Wow. Doubling in size year on year for the last 3 years running. I don't think anyone really had a grasp as to how quickly and how big this market is. Mm. This means a lot of people are buying the products, so there is a consumer protection issue here. The testing exercise provided a lot of interesting results, to say the least. Mm-hmm. 38% of the products we tested contained controlled substances. One product contained 0 cannabinoids. So these are the issues that are faced in an industry that's not regulated. So we're looking to create a self-regulatory framework led by the industry. We work with some fantastic companies to really help drive the standards for the industry. Working with the key regulatory partners to understand what we're trying to address here. And it's all about working together, whether it's not just an issue for the regulators, it's not just an issue for the industry. It's about bringing all the good actors together and saying, right, how can we protect consumers' interests and get better products out there that are more rigorously tested. We built a quality charter which sets the context for all the issues we need to address. First and foremost is legal compliance, so the whole novel foods issue. But the charter does cover all aspects of CBD products, so testing, manufacturing, labelling, sustainability.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you, Shomi. There's lots to talk about there. Clearly consumer trust is a big issue. But before we get into a bit more detail about that, Sarah, would you mind talking to us about novel foods? I'm sure most of the general public won't know what novel foods are or the novel foods regulations are.
Yeah, so the novel food regulation is a European legislation which essentially looks at foods that have not got a history of consumption prior to 1997 and essentially wants to do a safety assessment to ensure that they are safe for consumption by the general public population. The key thing with cannabinoids is that the industry could not prove that level of consumption prior to 1997, so the European Food Standards Agency have put that on a novel foods list, which means that to legally sell a product in the UK, anywhere in Europe, you need to go through that safety assessment and get it approved by the European Food Standards Agency.
Right. Okay, and who would be dealing with that in the UK?
In the UK, so you would talk to the Food Standards Agency in the UK, but the application and the dossier that you put together containing that safety information would go to the European Food Standards Agency, who would do that risk assessment and say, yes, it's safe, or no, it's not.
And just how big a process is this novel foods application?
So in terms of providing a package of information, so you need to look at your product and clearly define what's in the product in terms of cannabinoid content, any other ingredients in there, and really have a good specification of what's in your product. You need to talk about your manufacturing process. But then the next section is all about proving that the product is safe, proving that the CBD is safe, and that is looking at some toxicology studies. So there's various different levels of toxicology studies, and putting together a real package of data that shows that if this goes out into the general population and is consumed as a food product it will be safe because it doesn't have the controls of a medicine. And also looking at the stability of a food product, because you will have a shelf life of something that is in a food product, or some of these ingredients are being made into candies or chocolate, and what happens when you go through that manufacturing process, and how does that affect the quality of the product? Does it degrade? And does that cause anything that will damage people's health?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So lots of information needed there.
Lots of information. In general, to sort of pull together all of that sort of information, you might be looking at about a year's worth of work. Wow. And then to submit the dossier to EFSA, and you're probably looking at another 18 months to get approval.
Wow. Okay, so quite a lengthy process. And how are the ACI helping in this regard? So
we are an external consultant, and we're working with the ACI to provide a strategy of how the industry can approach this in terms of what are the tests that we recommend that the companies are doing, what those timelines are, and who are best positioned to perform some of those analyses. And then we're going down to company level to advising companies on what they need, what information they've got, doing gap analyses, helping them prepare their dossiers to go in, and also looking if there's any groupings within industries. So if there's a ingredient supplier supplying to a number of different products, whether we can group those applications together to reduce the workload and the burden on the regulatory bodies, so they don't have to assess lots of different applications for the same thing.
Sure. And how many companies have gone through this process so far?
Well, so far, not ACI members, nobody from the UK, but there have been 17 applications that have gone into EFSA, and one has kind of got over the first hurdle, which is providing enough information to actually get into that process. Right. A lot of people are relying on literature data as opposed to generating their own sort of toxicology studies. So looking at published literature, which could be on any kind of CBD in any format, and it's most of the time you don't have the production information, you don't have the strength, you don't have the dose, and a lot of that information that's not relevant to the product that people are producing. So it's not really providing safety information on what's actually on the shelf. It's providing just general background, which is why a lot of these applications have stumbled the first hurdle.
So what you're trying to do is quite unprecedented.
Yeah, we're trying to ensure that certainly the UK standard is the highest, and we are doing exactly as EFSA asks, and we're producing a legally compliant industry, which could be the gold standard for around the world.
Fantastic. Parveen, if we can move on to you. Would you firstly mind telling us a bit about your background, because you've been in the pharma industry for over 20 years and have a great pedigree in analysis in this area?
That's right. I've been working in the pharmaceutical industry, and especially in cannabinoid industry as well. I mean, prepared the soft gel cannabis capsules for FDA approval for Dronabinol, and I feel that CBD is a very special case, although it's been classified as a novel food, but it falls in a very special category, in a sense that along with the novel food, it contains the controlled drug substances as a related impurities, and that has to be controlled. And currently, at the moment, the systems which are in place are not adequate enough to cater for that control of these cannabinoids, and therefore I feel that this requires a special standard, setting up a special standard. It can't be just a normal standard. You can't put a medicinal cannabis standards to the CBD because it will be too tight, but novel food standard on its own will not cater unless a special attention is given to that controlled substances, and that's where ACI is doing the work to do the gap analysis to ensure there are sufficient controls in place to control these controlled substances. And from my experience from the past working with the cannabinoids, there are lots of cannabinoids which are light sensitive, air sensitive, temperature sensitive. So that means a special attention need to be given to these cannabinoids when testing these materials, because there's quite a possibility that when you are testing these CBD materials off the shelf from the market, you might be degrading them while you are testing it, and therefore you are not getting the true results. And in fact, we found that already when the CMC did the testing exercise for 30 samples, which shows clearly that there is a gap in analytical testing, and that is very serious gap, which is now impacting the consumer, in a sense that consumer are taking these products, they don't know how much they are taking, how much controlled substance they are taking, and in a sense that regulatory bodies are trying to address that gap, but they don't have the means if there aren't any standardized industrial testing methods around. I'm not saying that there has to be one standard analytical method which should employ to all the product, but at least there should be a reasonable attempt to see that we have an analytical method to control these controlled substances. And in order to control these controlled substances, you need to ensure that the methods which are used for testing these products are stability indicating. That's absolute key, because if the methods are not stability indicating, you don't know what is expiry date, you don't know how long these materials are stable for, and if there aren't any standardized method in the sample preparation of these products, will lead to an inconsistency in the result testing. So I think it's beneficial for all the consumers that this area is addressed, and that's where ACI are putting in standards in place to ensure we have robust analytical standards which can meet those requirements which are currently existing in the market.
Sure. So I think there's a couple of themes there. That at its very basic level, you're testing to see what the profile of a certain product is, i.e. X% CBD, X% THC, but there's not allowed to be any THC, but a profile of different cannabinoids.
That's right.
And you're wanting to do that both at the time of initial testing and then stability testing. So how long, if you've got it at home in a cupboard, will the profile change over time?
So you need to make sure that your expiry date is based on that stability testing.
Yeah. And what are the challenges that you're having in relation to the testing or establishing a standardised process for this?
Currently, I think the biggest challenge is CBD is not a controlled drug. So anybody can make it, sell it, it's not controlled by Home Office. But the related impurities which are present in that, like the THC or CBN or THCV, they are controlled by the Home Office. So you need the license to handle those, but you don't need a license to handle CBD. So that in itself creates a very big dilemma. If you don't have a standardized analytical testing method and you don't have a confidence in those methods, how are you going to prove that you don't have a controlled substance or you do have a controlled substance? And that means, do you need a Home Office license or you don't need a Home Office? So there are a host of questions arising and stemming from these issues. And not only that, in my view, a normal consumer is taking these products regularly without any medical advice, because the medical cannabis is not available, and hence people are using this novel food CBD as for their various ailments without any medical advice. So you don't know what impact it's having in long term to those consumers. So I think it's a serious issue which needs to be addressed.
Yeah. And has the Food Standards Agency taken a view on the relative risks of products that are on the market at the moment?
I haven't have any discussions with Food Standards Agency personally, but ACI and CMC have been working with Food Standards Agencies, and we will be presenting our approach to address these issues. So I don't have that information unless Sarah has.
No, I think they're aware that there are problems in the industry, and they're aware that a lot of all the products out there don't meet novel foods approval. So in their opinion, everything is illegal. And they are working on their approach and how they're tackling that in a proportional way.
I guess one last question for you, Parveen, in relation to the testing. Is the model that you're working on, will it also be testing for things like heavy metals as well?
Yes, absolutely. Being CBD being a plant-derived product, it will have to go through all those regulations, the pesticides, the microbiological testing, as well as the heavy metals, ochratoxins, aflatoxins. So all that normal testing which you do for a herbal pharmaceutical will have to go through that.
Okay, Shomi, so you mentioned earlier on about the charter that was built off the back of the report that the CMC commissioned earlier this year into CBD. Can you talk a bit more about that?
Yeah, sure. So the work that Parveen and Sarah's doing through GRS covers the first two pillars of our charter, which is adherence to legal frameworks in the markets you're operating in, robust testing, and then the other pillars of the charter include labelling, manufacturing, adherence to the laws on controlled drugs in the market you're operating in, marketing ethics, and sustainability. So, for example, labelling. There's a lot of confusion in the industry. You know, when a consumer picks up a product, Sometimes the strength is expressed as a percentage or the milligram content. Sometimes companies could do better to be clearer. So we've made it absolutely necessary for all of our members that sign up to the charter to be as clear as possible to help the consumer make a choice. The MHRA look very closely at medicinal claims, so we take their guidelines on board to build out this part of our charter. Manufacturing, we're making it absolutely necessary that all of our members manufacture their products to the highest of standards and taking precedence from global manufacturing standards like ISO, like GMP. Marketing ethics, we've taken the guidance given by the Advertising Standards Agency and incorporated that into our charter. And lastly, sustainability, we built into our charter. So we've got a real chance to set an example for other industries by putting sustainability at the heart of everything we do. And we've taken the lead from the UN Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, and we're working very closely with companies to see how they can implement that into their supply chain.
Fantastic. Sustainability for me is one of the huge reasons why I find the whole cannabis sector really interesting. And if you're building a new industry, you can build it with some really good morals from the very start. So it's great that that's part of the charter. Do you think, it feels like this is all building towards some sort of kite mark for the industry. Is that the kind of medium to long-term plan?
Absolutely. Over the coming months, we'll be looking at how we can uphold the standards of our charter through an external audit committee. So you've got 7 pillars of the charter. Each one needs domain experts. It's no use me just saying, yes, Anuj, you adhere to these 7 pillars. We need, just like how we brought Parveen in to look at testing, we need to bring in that level of expertise on each of the pillars, and that will culminate in a kite mark, the ACI kite mark. So we're working with the regulators, we're working with industry, but there needs to be a public offering. That, there's a lot of trust that's been taken out of the industry by bad actors, let's say. We're absolutely delighted to be working with the good actors in the space to put forward these standards, and it's about putting that trust back into the industry through this kite mark scheme. So over the coming months we'll be building our capabilities to audit this charter.
So Parveen, how are you setting up the quality for this new charter?
I feel that the quality will be really quality by design for this particular case, because it's a special case and needs a really new set of standards. So as through our gap analysis, we found that what are the gaps in all the CMC members' products. We'll be setting up the quality based on the gap analysis, so it's bespoke quality standard for the CBD industry.
Great. And can you tell us through some timelines around this?
Yeah, sure. So the ACI's formal launch is on the 8th of November, and the following 3 to 6 months we'll be building this audit capability, and hopefully by Q2 next year we'll be looking to launch the kite mark for all companies that are compliant. So in between now and then, it's about working with companies to make sure that they are up to the standard. And I guess even before that, it's building the standards. We've got a framework today, but it all starts on the 8th of November.
Brilliant, brilliant. Thank you. That's been a really interesting panel discussion. Thank you, Parveen. Thank you, Sarah, and thank you, Shomi. I think it's a fantastic project that you're working on, not just building minimum standards, but building good standards. So I wish you all the best with it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.